Hello, it's Wendy Hernandez. Welcome to another Command the Courtroom interview. Today I have a fantastic guest, Renée Siegel. She's out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Renee is a licensed counselor, a certified coach, and a certified Enneagram teacher. So today we're going to talk about the 9 paths through conflict through the Enneagram. And welcome, Renee. I'm happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Did I say that right? First off, Enneagram.
It is. It's Enneagram. Good job.
Okay, it's awesome. So I am so excited to have you on the show today because lately I've been seeing a ton just out there on social media and the people I follow about the Enneagram. And I have no idea what it means, but I'm fascinated to learn about it. And I really want to understand how it can help us through conflict. So can we start out by talking about what the Enneagram is and what it means?
Sure. So the word Enneagram means, Ennea means 9 in Greek, and gram is the abbreviation for a diagram or an illustration. So I'm going to show you what an Enneagram map or illustration looks like. And you can tell me if I'm holding this correctly. Can you see this?
So, okay. So we see most of it there. Thanks, Renee.
Yeah. So this is a map of the Enneagram. So the word Enneagram means an illustration of 9, and basically, that's kind of complex. But what it really means is the study of these 9 types have become pretty popular recently because they're 9 personality types, and there are all sorts of personality tests out there, personality assessments and evaluations that bring to light that not all of us are the same, meaning that we don't share the same worldview or perceptions, likes and dislikes, things like that. But the Enneagram goes above and beyond that in many ways. First of all, it's very ancient. It's founded on very, very ancient wisdom traditions where all of the spiritual teachings from the 3 major religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam cross over and have a spiritual aspect to investigate how and why we feel a separation from our creator, whatever you might call your creator. So there's spiritual underpinnings. It's become very, very popular recently as the Enneagram of personality, and that it not only shows how we feel alone and separate from that divine source that created all of us, but there are various types and patterns of that each of the 9 types have with cognition, emotion, and behaviors. And so when you start to look at that, along with this kind of spiritual background, you get a pretty profound, intense teaching that allows you to see that there are 9 lenses through which everyone looks at the world. Most recently, what's become really amazing is that Dan Siegel, no relative of mine, although I wish he were,
Yeah.
out of UCLA, Dr. Dan Siegel, and others have found that there's a neurobiological blueprint to each one of the types. So they're seeing that brain chemistry and that our own neurobiology is tied into these personality types. They don't know whether it happened prior to birth with DNA or it's a result of nurture. It's probably a nature-nurture kind of relationship, like many things are. But it takes it above and beyond the typical personality assessment because you're looking at thinking styles, feeling styles, behavior styles, some spiritual kind of underpinnings, maybe some neurobiological brain chemistry that we can really see as contributing to how and why our personalities do what they do.
Awesome. I love that. What a great explanation. So let me ask you this then. How and when can an individual use the 9 different Enneagram types in their life? When is it appropriate?
Well, anytime after they're probably around 18 years old, because we don't know how much nature and nurture have engaged or cooperate and collaborate with each other to form type. We have, certain kinds of periods of our life where certain things come online. Like a baby doesn't think in the same way that a 7-year-old does. And a 7-year-old starts to come online with reason and logic. And so by the time we have reason and logic online, understanding our bodies online, and I'm not talking about on the internet online, I'm talking about functioning online, right? And
Yes.
our hearts being able to feel and emote. When we can tie those, and those are called the three centers of intelligence in the Enneagram, and each one of us leads with one of those three centers.
Mm.
So there are three portals or three avenues, gateways of us to know. It's not that we don't all think, feel, react, have all those experiences, but we lead with one. So certain people are more sensitive and they lead with that emotional kind of energy. Others are very scholarly and they lead with kind of, I need to know the facts, I need to research it. And some people intuitively trust their belly and their gut to just guide them, and they rely on that. We all have all three. We all use all three. And by the time all three of them are online and we're kind of aware of them, I would say 18 years old or a little
Okay.
older.
All right. Excellent. So, and I don't know if I'm going to ask this question in the right order. So, you're the expert on this, so I'll let you guide us in terms of where we should go. But one question I have is, how do people find out where they lead, or how they lead? What area they lead primarily with.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, so the 9 areas, I'm sure we're going to delve into those and how we can help those or use those to help us in our relationships, and especially in conflict, because I can tell you a lot of people who watch this show are in conflict with an ex-partner.
Yes. Well, that's I think one of the most amazing things about the Enneagram is that once we understand what causes us reactivity, our triggers and our blind spots, and what charges us or causes us reactivity, we can stand back and watch it a lot better than having a knee-jerk reaction and let it run our lives. So that's kind of the overall purpose.
Okay.
So each one of the 9 types does have does lead in one direction, and maybe it would be helpful, since we have just a limited amount of time today, to just kind of jump into them and talk about them.
Yes, please.
So we're going to start with the 3 body types, the 3 intuitive types, the ones who instinctively, just in their bellies, they kind of make a decision based on what that gut experience is. And we call that a sensate way of knowing. And those are types 8, 9, and 1. We're not going to do this chronologically, because if we did, we'd start with the 1, which is a body type, and end with the 9, which is a body type. And I want to keep them in that triad, because once somebody just knows that, I trust my gut more than anything else, there's it kind of just opens up the notion of, yeah, I do trust my gut, and my gut doesn't lie to me, and I'm aware of what it's trying to tell me. And generally, if I trust my gut, I'm right on. But that gut can also cause a lot of reactivity. So in our type 8s are the only Enneagram type that absolutely have a little bit of a love affair with anger. And it's a great place to start, because when we have conflict, oftentimes anger is very much in the forefront, right?
Yes.
So if this type is the only type that's really comfortable with anger, and you don't share that type, then you are in relationship with someone who is not only juiced by anger and feels like they come alive with anger, but they might be might come off, especially if they're not aware of it, as very intimidating. They might come off as a bully. That's the work that the type 8 often has to do, because there's such a strong pushback against being vulnerable in their life and their neurobiology. And we could spend a day on each one of these types. We're just touching into them. So if you have somebody who's very comfortable with anger, you feel their energy before they walk into the room. They're just a lot of vitality. It's kind of a burst of energy, and they engage with someone else who's not comfortable in that arena. That is always causes conflict. Now, if the other party is also a type 8, then there could be conflict, because neither of them will back down. Yep. So they have to learn how to negotiate that space, because an 8 generally doesn't back down. They really need to be heard. It's a part of what is happening is there is a strong need for justice and fairness. And I'm sure you can think of probably 10 clients as I say this that fall into that category. But it doesn't make it easy for others who don't understand that to be around them. So so the path through conflict for that type is for them to soften and really understand that vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability could actually be a strength. Now, I would imagine at certain points in family law, that's probably really difficult to convince somebody of. It might be something that they do work on afterwards. But certainly, when you look at mediating, that's a really important thing to understand. Our type 9, which is the next type of our body type, and the center point of the body types, 8s, 9s, and 1s, 9 being the center. 9s are the least comfortable type with conflict. Most of the types don't love conflict, and none of them like it as much as the 8. But the 9 really dislikes conflict. And here's the crazy caveat. They love to mediate conflict for other people. They just don't like conflict that involves them. So if I'm having a conflict with you and I'm a type 9, I am running in the other direction or shutting down. We'll talk about those strategies. If I watch 2 of my friends or you and someone else is having a conflict and I care very much for both of you, I'm right in there trying to mediate that conflict because I don't like conflict. I see unity in the world. I want everybody to get along. They call this type the peacemaker or mediator because they see all points of view. What causes them conflict is to have to make a decision, to be really decisive, to come into conflict with other people, to work through very uncomfortable situations. And, as a trained marriage and family therapist, one of the things I know is that you can't be close to another person unless you're willing to move through conflict with grace and respect. That's what creates emotional intimacy. And yet the 9 is just comfortable with it for everybody in their sphere, but not comfortable with it for themselves.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So not nagging them, sitting with them, being very patient with them while they can come to an understanding. They call this a self-forgetting type because they often are so aware and other-focused that they have forgotten or disregarded their own needs, and sometimes they can even feel invisible. Type 1s, which is the third part of that triad, of the body triad, is oftentimes, they call it the perfectionist or the reformer. They pay attention to detail, morality, what is correct. They see things in the world that need correction. And I would imagine that this is a very, very hard time for type 1s because there is so much that needs to be corrected in our world right now. And they've really lost sight of the fact that, there is something about divine order that has our backs. I mean, we don't have to call on the sun to rise and set. We don't have to call on our hearts to beat in the morning, or our lungs to be filled with air. There is something that is in operation that has our backs and has everything in perfect order already. But a type 1 tends to be very critical. And so you can see how that might be a real problem with conflict, because if they're paying attention to everything that needs correction and you're the recipient of that criticism, that's not a fun place to be. So relaxing that criticism and noticing that everything is really okay and kind of backing off and leaving room for people. And the craziest thing about it is, as hard as they are on everybody else, they're 10 times harder on themselves.
So a question that I had after hearing you talk about the first 3 types that you wanted to go over is that none of these types is a good type or a bad type. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. There is not one type that is healthier or less healthy than any other type, but there are levels of development in our types. So as I grow healthier in my type, I'm going to be more likely to connect with other people of other types that are at that same level of growth.
Got it. Okay, so wanted to put that out there in case somebody's listening and they hear, that this type, the anger is a predominant part of this type. I don't necessarily want that person to feel badly about themselves or badly about somebody else.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Thank you for that clarification. That's
Yeah.
really great. That's interesting. And so far, I'm resonating with type 9, but I want to hear what the other 6 types are.
Sure, sure. And you might resonate with one of the others because there's one other type that's very other focused too. So as we
Okay.
go into the heart types, the first heart type is a type 2. We call them the giver or the helper. They tend to do a lot of focusing on people outside of themselves, and they lead with their heart intelligence. But it's interesting in this particular type, even though they lead with heart intelligence, they're more likely to be aware of other people's emotions and other people's needs than they are their own. So they're similar to the type 9 in that they're very other focused. They're pretty accurate about other people's needs, which is even kind of crazier because they are very engaging. So in the heart center, the whole the focus is to focus on heart-centered intelligence. It's mirroring, it's watching other people, it's in the engagement and the energy that happens between two people in types 2s, 3s, and 4s in various different ways that you'll hear about. So in the type 2, I am very attuned to what other people need. Sometimes I lose sight of what I need. In fact, sometimes I find myself in situations where I have just felt compelled to either give and I am a type 2, I'm going to out myself here.
Okay.
Um, you feel so compelled to move forward to help another individual that you forget about yourself, and then resentment can happen because you haven't taken care of yourself.
Okay.
The difference between a 9 and a 2, there are many differences, but one of the many is that a 9 really is unaware of their needs a lot of the time. A 2 is kind of in and out of awareness with their needs, and 9s don't generally find themselves feeling a level of resentment when they haven't addressed their own needs. 2s will move into that place.
Okay.
So for 2s, conflict is about, not taking care of myself as I take care of everybody else. It's about setting healthy boundaries. It's about looking at self-care as being different than getting my nails done and my hair colored. It's about really spending time with myself, alone with myself, getting to know myself, and having the courage to say what I really feel, because I want to be liked so badly that my avoidance of conflict is to just go along with maybe something that you want to do, even though inside I know it's not right for me.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. So,
Interesting. That
so
that
that's the type.
resonates too.
Yeah. That's the type that, so 9s and 2s can have a level of codependency, and we could get into a whole thing about that.
Oh, wow.
But that's not where we're going here.
Yeah.
So moving out of conflict or moving through conflict with a 2 really requires sitting with and having patience to ask them what they want to do, what's important to them. Do they have an opinion or an idea of something that is not being shared or recognized? The type 3 is best exemplified, and they're the center point of the heart types, is best exemplified by corporate America. Busy, busy, busy. Nike, just do it. We have to be efficient, we have to be productive, and even though they come from the emotional center and they're very, very sensitive, they are really experience emotions in a way that emotions kind of get in the way of getting stuff done. So they will just stay really, really, really busy. They're kind of like a human doing and not a human being.
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll see that, you see that in a lot of people who are just very much into their work and not being aware again of themselves. Coming home to themselves is the biggest part, and making room for emotions as a center of intelligence that really is giving you a lot of good information. Type 3s, like I said, are very, very sensitive, but a lot of people don't experience their sensitivity because they just It's just like, just the facts, ma'am. It's just move on. Let's. They're very fast paced and they're very impatient. So being patient and encouraging self-care for them and slowing down is a really big part of moving through conflict with a type 3.
Okay.
And the last of our heart types, a type 4, is a type that feels emotions incredibly deeply. I use this example because of my mental health training, but they're the best at answering suicide hotlines. No matter what you throw at them, they can just sit with deep, intense emotion that would bother so many other types. They have the capacity to just hold the intensity and almost find something sweet and delicious about even sadness.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
they, they oftentimes feel very misunderstood. They're unique, they're eclectic, they're creative. They may seem somewhat dramatic at times if they're unaware. So, they might get very reactive around feeling misunderstood. And you can see how that might create conflict, not somebody not just paying enough attention or allowing them the space to feel deeply.
Yes.
So those are our heart types. And then we have our head types, which is the type that's kind of best known in our culture, and that is logic, logic, logic runs and rules everything. And the head type relies on facts or mentalizing, strategizing, mentally mapping out situations. And the type 5 does that with research and facts, just gathering and gathering and gathering and gathering facts. And sometimes they're so much into gathering the facts that they have forgotten that there might be a problem or something that needs to be resolved or investigated and looked at and done. So a funny Enneagram question for a type 5 is, how do you know when you have enough information to turn in a research paper or to turn in a deposition or a briefing or whatever legal? How do you know? And a type 5 would say, well, I turn it in and there's never really enough information. I'm never really done.
Ah, yes.
And
Yeah.
they're very emotionally detached most of the time. They feel like the world wants a lot from them. Conflict happens when people are intrusive into their space and into their life and want a lot of emotional engagement. And they're also very sensitive, really sensitive, but they are sensitive through a relationship with themselves and their kind of own little world around things. So being patient, typical we would think gender wise, the difference of men and women is that men are less emotionally available. Not that that's true for everybody, but you know uh, that's the typical stereotype. Being kind, because they're so sensitive, being very tender with 5s. They're also very tender with others, but respecting their privacy. They compartmentalize. They may need a lot of time to themselves to just kind of rejuvenate, not being intrusive, and just allowing them space to be.
I can, as you're talking, Renee, I can see how this is valuable in conflict, but just in relationships in general. And I'm thinking about with my clients and how different clients react to the same request by me.
Yes.
And I always just, of course, they're different people and different background and different experiences, but I really, I'm putting clients, and I don't know if I really know because I'm just hearing your brief summaries here, but I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's why he reacted this way or she reacted that way. And maybe I could have reacted a little better, a little differently, instead of just putting the pressure on and saying, I need it today, 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 if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right. And them knowing too. I mean, them even taking a brief Enneagram assessment, we can talk about, how and where, and there are several complementary ones so that they have a sense of, wow, so when conflict shows up, this is what I do. And then have some sort of, engaging way of saying, this is how I tend to approach conflict. If this is your type, you may find that this is how you approach conflict. And so let's keep that dialogue open.
Yeah, I love it. Love
Yeah.
it.
So our middle type on our head types is a type 6, and they are constantly scanning for danger. They feel like in order to feel secure and safe and certain and have life feel more predictable, they have to just kind of look around and prepare for what potentially could go wrong. And it's interesting because in our little Enneagram world, type sixes say that they were practicing for 2020 their whole life, because what
Oh,
potentially could go wrong went wrong, right? That we have a lot
oh,
of things. And
yes.
so some of them who are aware of their type fared very well. They were just always prepared. They had extra food, or they knew how to escape, or they knew how to take care of themselves in difficult situations. They knew how to avert danger. They were totally prepared for that. And because of that, it's sometimes what is difficult around sixes is they're always playing the worst case scenario out. So they could come off, if they're unaware, as a very, what they call a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
I've got second guessing, self-doubting, worst case scenario, devil's advocate. I got that down pat.
Yes. I got it. I'm going to have my husband take this, and I'm going to take it. But, I get irritated with him because, we'll go out for a walk and he'll be like, I should carry a big stick in case somebody tries to attack us. And I'm like, why are you even going there? Why are you thinking about that? But maybe that explains it,
But just going into that grief, situation that you're describing, you get to see that's just the way that he's looking at the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
When he opens his eyes in the morning, that's the way that he looks at the world.
Yes.
And that's not the way that you look at the world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah. Right. Right. And then the last type, last head type, is a type 7. And so type 7s tend to be very optimistic. They also don't like emotions, but only negative emotions. They love positive emotions. And they're filled with being able to put a positive spin on anything. They're constantly seeking options and different ways of adventuring. They can be seen as hedonistic or opportunistic. They're somewhat self-centered, not from a place of any more narcissism than anybody else, but they do consider themselves first because they just want to have a good time. And you certainly don't want to go to a party without having a type 7 there, because they kind of make the party, and they always have a good time. And so navigating conflict for them is they run in the other direction when there's conflict. It's like, oh, this could be painful. This is uncomfortable. I'm going to suffer. Not good. And so getting them to sit down and even have a conversation is, once they understand that that's their type, and their type just kind of does that, and that the danger that's experienced is probably not real, and that they're actually going to have even a more fulfilling positive outcome by sitting through that conflict and having a conversation, then they're very willing to do that. And I'm married to a 7. And so we talk about that all the time. Both of us are conflict avoidant, but when tough stuff happens, I'm far more willing to get through it because I know my heart will open in a different way. He's still running in the other direction, and I'm trying to pull him back in the room and say, please come back.
Yes.
Talk to me. Please talk to me. I'm not so scary. It's not going to be bad. It's going to be good.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. So those are interesting. And so are these types helpful to us only if we know the other person's type, or do you think that it could be helpful for us to just know our type and deal with an ex-partner whose type we're not 100% sure of?
Well, that is an excellent question. And so many people will come to Enneagram trainings to get information about somebody else's type so they can figure them out and help them. And we need to start with ourselves. It's always nice if your partner or significant others, or I have lots of children, and they love the Enneagram, they know their types, and that's wonderful. But, and it makes it a whole lot easier for us to have to move through conflict, to have difficult conversations and things like that. But most importantly, if I know who I am, and I know the high side of my personality and the generous. So for a 2, the high side is being very kind and very generous and very warm and very nurturing. The low side is being very intrusive, and you can't live without me, and I need to help you, and you can't do this without me, and you need to give me something back in return, and kind of giving to getting. When I realize those parts of myself, and the less becoming, less desirable parts of myself, I can watch them and I can make that shift because I'm now aware of them. I can notice them. So the Enneagram is a new kind of thing that's been all around the internet that you've been seeing lately and hearing from everybody. Just knowing these types is just the beginning. It is just the beginning until you're really willing to take the deep dive into looking at yourself. You don't realize how many more benefits you can get from it. There's a benefit in knowing your type. There's a benefit in knowing your partner's type. But when you really start to investigate, like, why am I motivated to do that? What causes that? It's a game changer. You can all of a sudden take a pause, investigate yourself, notice yourself, stop the reactivity, and then pivot, because all conflict, and here's why I was so excited to have this conversation with you, all conflict is reactive. It's not receptive.
Ah, got it.
Receptivity comes from a very, very different place. It comes from a very calm central nervous system. It comes from the awareness and the ability to notice and to take that pause and then make a change. Reactivity and conflict are knee-jerk. You got me. I'm going forward. Can't stop myself.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So being aware of each of these types and what type you are and taking a deep dive, then will that help you get to the self-aware place that you're talking about that would make you more receptive? Did that make sense?
It can. There's tons of YouTube videos. There's tons of therapists and coaches like me out there that do the Enneagram. And now that it's a global experience, you can have a conversation with somebody in Australia if you're both up at the same time. I mean, the Arizona Enneagram Association has tons and tons of ongoing workshops. I do workshops for them. I'm doing a workshop on relationships and trauma at the end of this year. They're doing a great relationship series that starts on February 27th. It's a 3-part series. The 3rd part will be trauma. First part is an introduction to relationships. ArizonaEnneagram.org is the website for that. I do podcasts. There are YouTube podcasts. You can follow me on the letter U, letter R, purepotential.com. You'll get some brief information about the Enneagram, and you can sign up for my social media. But having a community, I will say that having a community, whether it's an online community, an in-person community, a counselor, coach, a spiritual director that understands the Enneagram, having that community support is helpful because we all have blind spots. We all have triggers that we don't see. It's impossible for us to be objective all the time about ourselves.
Yes.
And so that community work in some way is really, really, really helpful.
Okay, that's great coming from you. And just, even for somebody like you with the extensive training, I know that you have coaches and mentors and things like that too, right?
I do. And I have a lot of them that I work with because they know more than I do. And I have a lot of coaches and counselors that work with me because I've taught them the Enneagram, and I use the Enneagram a lot in my, because I have 3 specialties: relationships, wellness, and long-term addiction recovery. And I'm sure you probably see some addictions in your family conflict too.
Absolutely.
So, and that makes things so much better when people know their type, even in terms of navigating recovery from addictions.
Wonderful. So if somebody's interested in contacting you or working with you or being exposed to what you offer, then they can go to, it's yourpurepotential.com.
Yes, yourpurepotential.com, the letter U, the letter R, and then the word purepotential.com. And I offer a free consultation for 15, 20 minutes to talk to anybody that's interested in the Enneagram or interested in working with me. I'm available.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Such good information, Renee. And, I'm going to go out and find an assessment. Do you have any recommendations in terms of
I do have a recommendation. Yeah. There's a complimentary assessment that's nothing's 100% accurate. So a caveat here is that if you take a test and you find that 2 or 3 of these are really, really strong numbers for you, don't fret. Just stay with those 2 or 3 numbers. As long as you don't have 8 numbers on there that are all the same. That
Yeah.
can be really confusing. But 2 or 3 numbers just means that you're refining your understanding of yourself. And you will come to one number because we only have one number. We only have one Enneagram type, and it stays with us our whole life. We don't change. It's a strategy that we've used to manage our life. It's kind of like super glued onto us for our human existence. And the test that I like is found at, this is an odd site. It's eclecticenergiesplural.com, and it's the Enneagram Test 2. So there are 2 Enneagram tests on this site, and it's eclecticenergiesplural.com, and it's Enneagram Test number 2.
Test number 2. Got it. Okay, and we'll put the links for the show notes on this.
Yep, it's free, and if anybody decides to contact me from the show, it would be really helpful if you have those test results, and then we could have a far more meaningful conversation than just me talking to you about the Enneagram, because you'll have some idea what your type is.
Okay, excellent. Well, I can tell that you're helping tons of people, and I know that this show will help a lot of people maybe come to an understanding about themselves and about their pattern of conflict with their ex or soon to be ex, and just relationships in general. I'm already thinking about how this is going to help my marriage, my relationships at work, and my relationships with clients. So thank you, Renee. This has been really, really enlightening.
Yes, and if you have any clients that just need to find out their type and do a brief little piece around how they're managing conflict, I'd be happy to work with them.
I love it. Thank you so much. And we talked before the show about you coming back. So I hope we can make that happen and dive deeper into some of this stuff and give people more information.
I would love that.
Thanks, Renee.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So to all you out there, we will be back with another interview next week. But until then, remember to keep on trucking and get out there and command the courtroom. See you next time.